The repeating pattern of imperial collapse. Throughout the last 5 centuries, history has witnessed the dramatic downfall of 3 global superpowers: Spain, Britain, and the Soviet Union. Each of these empires, at their zenith, seemed invincible, commanding vast territories, controlling global currencies, and wielding unmatched military might. Yet each followed a disturbingly similar sequence of decline, culminating in rapid and irreversible collapse. Today, the United States appears to be tracing the same path, stage by stage, decision by decision, echoing the choices and missteps of its predecessors. This article explores the 7-stage pattern of imperial collapse, drawing lessons from the past and examining the current trajectory of the United States. By understanding the historical blueprint, we can better grasp the forces at play and the potential consequences that lie ahead. What does imperial collapse look like? Imperial collapse is rarely the result of a single catastrophic event. It does not begin with invasion or military defeat. Instead, it starts quietly, with economic exhaustion. The empire stretches itself beyond its ability to sustain its commitments. Military bases scattered across the globe, wars on multiple fronts, promises it cannot keep, and debts it cannot repay. Initially, the decline is invisible. The currency still functions, the military still wins battles, and the government continues to make promises. But beneath the surface, the foundation is cracking. Resources are misallocated, productive capacity shrinks, and the best and brightest begin to leave. Allies hedge their bets, enemies test boundaries, and trade partners seek alternatives. The advantages that once made the empire powerful become vulnerabilities. This is not theoretical. It is the lived experience of Spain, Britain, and the Soviet Union. Each of these empires, at their zenith, seemed invincible, overextended militarily, debased their currency, and refused to accept reality until collapse was already underway. The 7 stages of imperial decline. Stage 1. Military overextension. The first sign of impending collapse is military overextension. Empires, flush with power and resources, commit themselves to defending far-flung territories and engaging in multiple conflicts. The cost of maintaining such a vast military presence becomes unsustainable. Spain. After Columbus discovered the Americas, Spain became the first true world power. By the mid-15th century, Spanish galleons were bringing home hundreds of tons of silver annually, and the Spanish real was the global reserve currency. King Philip II, ruling from 1556 to 1598, spent lavishly on empire, fighting wars on 4 continents. Half of Spain's revenue went to the military, yet it was never enough. Britain. By 1900, Britain had military commitments everywhere: India, Africa, the Middle East, China, the Pacific, and the Caribbean. The cost was enormous. World War I forced Britain to choose between neutrality and bankrupting the empire to win. They chose to fight, incurring debts that would haunt them for decades. The Soviet Union. The USSR spent 15 to 20% of its GDP on the military, triple what America spent. They matched American technology and influence, propped up allies worldwide, and engaged in costly conflicts. The economic burden was unsustainable. Stage 2. Currency debasement. Unable to pay their bills through taxation alone, empires resort to debasing their currency. The mechanisms differ, mixing base metals into coins, abandoning the gold standard, or printing fiat money, but the result is the same: inflation and loss of trust. Spain. The Spanish crown began mixing copper into silver coins, reducing their real value. By 1600, Spanish coins contained barely any silver, and merchants stopped accepting them at face value. Inflation exploded. Britain. World War I drained Britain's gold reserves. They tried to maintain the pound's value by returning to the gold standard at the pre-war rate, but the currency was overvalued. Exports became too expensive, manufacturing declined, and unemployment rose. By 1931, Britain abandoned the gold standard, and the pound lost 25% of its value overnight. The Soviet Union. The ruble was never a real currency on the international stage. Even Soviet citizens preferred dollars when they could get them. The government had to buy foreign goods with gold and oil because nobody wanted rubles. As oil prices dropped and gold reserves depleted, the USSR ran out of real money. Stage 4. Debt spiral. As revenues fall and expenses rise, empires borrow constantly. They enter a debt spiral, borrowing to pay interest on previous borrowing, running deficits even in peacetime. Spain borrowed from Italian and German bankers, declaring bankruptcy 4 times in 40 years. Each time they promised reforms but returned to borrowing and spending. Britain. Britain never recovered from World War I debt. World War II added another $120 billion in costs. By 1945, Britain owed the United States and Canada more than its entire GDP. The Soviet Union. The USSR's economic stagnation and currency collapse left it unable to fund its commitments. The government ran out of money and the military could no longer be paid. Stage 5. Loss of productive capacity. With easing money flowing in, empires lose the incentive to produce. They become dependent on imports, hollowing out their manufacturing and agricultural base. Spain. The Spanish nobility considered work beneath them. Manufacturing declined, agriculture stagnated, and wealth flowed out to pay for imported goods. When the silver mines depleted, the entire system collapsed. Britain. Britain's overvalued currency made exports too expensive, leading to a decline in manufacturing and rising unemployment. The empire became increasingly dependent on imports. The Soviet Union. Central planning stifled innovation and productivity. Factories produced junk, farms failed, and the USSR began importing grain despite having some of the best farmland on Earth. Stage 6. Social decay. Economic failure leads to social decay. Crime rises, homelessness increases, drug abuse spreads, and the best and brightest leave for greener pastures. Trust in institutions collapses, and political dysfunction becomes the norm. Spain. Crime exploded, beggars filled the streets, and productive citizens emigrated. Spain was left with bureaucrats, soldiers, and priests, no one creating wealth, everyone consuming it. Britain. The loss of empire and economic decline led to a diminished global role. Britain maintained the pretense of power, but became a museum of what used to be great. The Soviet Union. The collapse was sudden and total. The government ceased to function, the ruble became worthless, and the superpower vanished in 900 days. Stage 7. Loss of reserve currency status. As confidence erodes, allies diversify, trade moves to other currencies, and the reserve currency comes flooding back home. The empire loses its privileged position in global finance. Early signs. BRICS nations are developing alternatives. Central banks are buying gold, and countries like China and Russia are trading in their own currencies. Saudi Arabia is accepting yuan for oil. The cracks are forming. Stage 7. Collapse. The final stage is not gradual decline, but sudden implosion. A currency crisis triggers a debt crisis, which triggers a political crisis. Overnight, the superpower becomes a cautionary tale, its currency relegated to regional status, its empire a memory. The United States, following the pattern. The United States has already completed 5 of the 7 stages of imperial decline. The parallels with Spain, Britain, and the Soviet Union are striking. Military overextension. With over 750 military bases in 80 countries and troops in 150 countries, the U.S. is committed to defending Europe through NATO, Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, and fighting in the Middle East. The military budget exceeds $850 billion annually, more than the next 10 countries. Yet equipment is aging, recruitment is down, and commitments are increasingly difficult to fulfill. Currency debasement. Since 1971, when Nixon closed the gold window, the dollar has been a pure fiat currency. Since 2000, the money supply has increased by 400%. Since 2020, over $6 trillion has been printed. The dollar has lost 98% of its purchasing power since 1971. Debt spiral. The United States owes $36 trillion, 120% of GDP. Interest payments alone are approaching $1 trillion a year, exceeding defense spending. Deficits run every year, even in peacetime and a growing economy. The country borrows to pay interest on previous borrowing, a classic debt spiral. Loss of productive capacity. America's manufacturing base has been gutted, shipped to China, Mexico, and Vietnam. The U.S. imports $800 billion more than it exports annually, and is dependent on foreign supply chains for medicine, electronics, steel, and even military components. Social decay.
Trust in institutions is at all-time lows. Crime and homelessness are rising. Drug overdoses kill 100,000 Americans annually, and the best and brightest are leaving or disengaging. Fertility rates are collapsing, and political dysfunction is total. The looming stages: reserve currency loss and collapse. The United States is now on stage 5 of 7. The next stage is the loss of reserve currency status. Allies are diversifying, trade is moving to other currencies, and the dollar's dominance is being challenged. When the reserve currency fails, the collapse will not be gradual but sudden and brutal. The Soviet Union went from superpower to non-existent in 900 days. Britain lost its empire in 20 years. Spain took longer, but the result was the same. When the debt becomes impossible and the military cannot be funded, the collapse is swift. The myth of exceptionalism. Each empire believed it was different, that the rules did not apply to them. Spain had gold and silver. Britain had the pound sterling. The Soviet Union had nuclear weapons. The United States has technology and the dollar. But the pattern does not care about exceptionalism. It is mathematical and inevitable. You cannot spend beyond your means forever. You cannot maintain empire without productive capacity. You cannot debase your currency without consequences. Once the sequence begins, it is locked in. The only question is timing. Lessons from history. Since 2020, the United States has accelerated every stage, printing more money, increasing debt, extending military commitments, hollowing out production, and fracturing society. The country is not walking the path of imperial decline. It is sprinting down it. Maybe America will find a way out. Maybe it will reform, rebuild, and restore. Maybe this time really is different. But history, mathematics, and the pattern of imperial collapse suggest otherwise. The answers to America's future are not hidden in the future. They are written in the past. By studying the sequence of decline that destroyed Spain, Britain, and the Soviet Union, we can understand the forces at work and the potential consequences that lie ahead. Imperial collapse is not a distant possibility. It is a recurring pattern unfolding in real time. The United States is deep inside the sequence, with the end visible to those who know the pattern. The lessons of history are clear. Empires fall not because they are invaded, but because they exhaust themselves economically, lose productive capacity, and succumb to social decay. The only hope lies in recognizing the pattern, understanding its inevitability, and taking bold action to reform before it is too late. The clock is ticking, and the consequences of inaction are written in the annals of history.